Hey, have you ever wanted to start a podcast? I've been trying to get up this podcast off the ground for years and I've used many different apps to record the episode, to get my show to the people, and trying to make money off the podcast. Well, now there's only one real way to do that, and that's Anchor. Anchor is your one stop shop for recording, hosting, distributing your podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free and easy to use. And now Anchor can match you with great sponsors who want to advertise in your podcast. That means you get paid to podcast right away. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now, reading this ad. I use Anchor for instantly recording my episodes in the app, and I also like the features on it, like bringing people into your show for other opinions and guests. So if you always wanted to start a podcast and make money doing it, go to anchor.fm/start. That's anchor.fm/start to join me and all the other podcasters already using Anchor. That's anchor.fm/start. Hello and welcome to the Sports Club on the Greater STL Sports Network. Our goals we here with you. You can tweet the network at Greater STLSN. You can find us on YouTube at Greater STL One Word Sports Network. You can find us also. We're on Instagram. There's a Snapchat out there. You can find us just about anywhere looking up Greater STL One Word Sports Network or Greater STL Sports. Now I was looking up to see when the last time I did this podcast was, and it was June of 2019, so almost 2.5 years ago. And really, this network wasn't just supposed to be this podcast. What started out was I was trying to build something to a whole different level. I wanted to do something that I liked doing, and I wanted to make it bigger than just this little rinky dinky, whatever you want to call what I do on this podcast. Now, most of the time I can just say it's laziness, but I'll not use that excuse and say that, I mean, there's things really going on behind the scenes with this podcast and with multiple other entities that we're trying to build something, not just with this, but with the music and anything. Essentially anything I can make money off of, I'm down for. But I've missed a lot since the last time I did this podcast. I think I'm going to guess if it was June-ish, I'm going to say I talked about the Blue Stanley Cup, but probably not enough. I missed the XFL. I missed the whole pandemic thing, which there's not going to be much talk about 2020 on this podcast. We can go, we might hit it here and there. But to me, if talking about 2020, the first thing that needs to be said is it's a lost season for everybody, every sports league. I mean, look how good the Blues were before the pandemic hit. The Cardinals only ended up playing 60 games in 2020. So, yeah, I mean, if the Cardinals won the World Series in 2020, I'd probably have been all over it. If the Blues would have won the Stanley Cup, I'd have been all over it. But I also have to have a realization here that, not winning the World Series wasn't the worst thing in 2020. It gave players, because they did a lot of switching back and forth, so it actually gave players some time to maybe get some Major League experience without having to start the clock early and all that. So it was a whole different thing. We're gonna get this podcast moving. We're gonna try some things here. Now, when they happen, it's beyond me. Try to keep up on the socials, the YouTube page, the Twitter page, Instagram's out there. I'm not on there, but if I see something on there, I might, I will answer. I might make a Facebook page just for a little bit, just to have somewhere to throw this in the long run, just have it up somewhere. Which it'll be all over the place. Once I actually get to it and actually get this podcast recorded, it goes on Spotify, Google Play, the Apple Store, all that. It does its own thing. I just have to type it in, load the file, and boom, it's like magic. But it was kind of difficult for me to think about how am I going to start the podcast? And I think being a St. Louis sports guy, in this city, you just have you almost, if you're going to do one, you might as well start with baseball. And for the Cardinals, I think this, what people somewhat consider an unsuccessful year, I think was a successful year. I mean, I don't think people look and see what the Cardinals lost. You lost 4/5 of your pitching staff if you count Martinez. You lost Bader for a period of time. you lost almost everybody in the bullpen. Hicks, I mean, I think the only three people healthy all year that actually stayed in the bullpen were Reyes, Cabrera, and Giovanni Gallegos. So people think like maybe this, we only made it to the one game playoff, but you made it to against a 100-win team in the best division in baseball. 200-win teams in the NL West. You took their best pitcher out of the game early with the game with either a 1-0 lead or a 1-1 tie, and you lost in the ninth on a bad slider by Reyes. I mean, to me, with what happened and having to go on a 17-game win streak to where you almost had a chance to be fighting for your division, I think it's a successful, actually celebratory season. I mean, you didn't have Flaherty almost for half the year. You didn't have Hudson or Hicks all year. I mean, there were some pretty big guys in there. Wainwright was your guy. You went on and got J.A. Happ and John Lester, and before that, you had Wade LeBlanc starting and actually giving you quality innings. So if you look at it all the way through, that you can tell that this was a successful season for the Cardinals. Now, after all that injuries and all that, and the having to change the lineup, not having the consistency that you maybe wanted out of a Bader, maybe the consistency at shortstop, maybe a little inconsistent. I don't even know if that's a word. Inconsistent at second and third base, even though Arenado had a wonderful season. But if you go with the average, you go the way people are talking about Tommy Edman, you can look and say that maybe Arenado had, an off season for him. And I think what the problem is with the whole situation the Cardinals are in is I think you had to have somebody hold that stuff together. And I think Mike Shildt was the guy and did a wonderful, great job of doing that. And also probably with the other coaches, the Ollie Marmoles, the Stubby Claps, the Papa Warners. I'm sure it wasn't just Mike Shildt. But after a 90-win season, you fired Mike Shildt. And you never really said what it was for. You never said it was for playing a field or anything like that. They said physiological differences. Now, I'm bad with technology and stuff, so I've recorded this podcast multiple different times. So, physiological is a word that I've messed up the whole time. And I hope I'm saying that right now, just to be honest with you. Like, I'm not the best, and I shouldn't be using big words, but that's what they said. I just say that they didn't get along about something. It's the better way to say it. And I think as teams are moving on, they're moving more towards guys that they can control. Now, you see the Mets hired a guy like Buck Showalter, an older guy, kind of like the La Russos and Dusty Bakers of the world. Because I think that the Mets know that they don't have like the minds that some of these other teams do in their front office. I don't think the Mets know what they're doing in general. So you're going to get a manager that knows how to run the on-the-field product. But for the last few years, it's been going that way to where the front office is running it. That's why you're seeing so many younger managers. That's why you're seeing the Brad Ausmuses getting coaching jobs in L.A. and Detroit. That's why you see a guy like an A.J. Hinch, Detroit and Houston. That's why you see a guy like now they got hired by the A's and Mark Kotze. And I'm sure I can go farther and farther down the list of Jace Tingler and when he was with San Diego. So I think that you see guys like Mozeliak and Bill DeWitt who think they're great minds, and obviously Bill DeWitt holds John Mozeliak at a higher regard than anybody else in the organization, and he's not running the show, not just with the off-the-field product and getting players and doing the free agency and all that, but he's also dealing with the lineups and the pitching staff and all that. And that's how it was for most teams. I mean, even a veteran manager like Dave Robert, who's been around for a few years, he said it, and I think it was the World Series where he said, hey, they came from the front office. We got to start Knuble over Urias. I mean, just think of that squad. If you made it to the Dodgers against the playoffs, somehow they lost. I don't get it. But you had to go against guys like Walter Buehler, a guy like Arias, Max Scherzer, and just think who they were missing with Kershaw and Duffy, who never got to play for the team, or Cole Hamels, who never got to play for their team, or the best pitcher they had on the roster at the beginning of the year, and Trevor Bauer. And then Trey Turner, Justin Turner, Gavin Lux, Mike Muncy, Matt Beauty, and I'm going to forget the best one, and Mookie Betts. I mean, that's a squad right there. And I think after what the season you had and getting rid of Schilt was probably not the smartest thing to do, but the Cardinals obviously didn't agree with what he was going to put on the field in his way. And they feel like they're going to hire a guy that was their bench coach last year and a guy that been in the organization for a while and has done some managerial stuff in the minor leagues. And now Oliver Marmol, because Oliver Marmol is going to be just a guy that's going to be in the clubhouse, along with like a Skip Schumacher, who they added from the Padres, who another guy who's been in the system, knows what it is, actually kind of like it, because if you think about it, I know it's not outfield to second base. It's Nolan Gorman moved from third to second. But think of a guy who came from center field and had to learn that position. I mean, it's probably good to have him on the roster along with the Kendo, who does minor league stuff down in Jupiter, to teach a guy like this. So, either way, it's essentially the same thing. Whether you're a fan of it or not. Because it's somebody that's organizational, kind of like a Matheny was. Where the Cardinals know they're probably getting told as soon as, hey, we run this show. This is our thing. And with the Cardinals, it's been happening for a long time. You can go back to 2010, 11, 12, where they were trading players away because they wanted players to play. I think it was an Alan Craig for John Lackey. I think that was the Matheny trade that John was like, hey, if you're not going to play Piscotty, we're going to force you to play him. And it was either Piscotty or Grichuk at the time. But now with all the analytics and all the computer work, I mean, they don't just get baseball people in there. They get people from all walks of life in there that know how to do the computer work and get there and do it. You can watch it in the movie Moneyball, which I just happened to be watching clips of the other day. You can see where it was starting to end. Like, I'm bigger on the stats, the home runs, the batting average, the RBIs, on base percentage. And they were big on off base percentage in that movie, but it was more based on computer simulations more than it was on the field product. And it worked. Now, I haven't heard the Cardinals say anything like that other than with Michaelis. And not since Michaelis, because they probably just got destroyed and were tired of hearing about it. But Michaelis was the last one that you can remember that they said, hey, we have a feeling that Michaelis is going to be better than Lance Lynn. Remember, Lance Lynn didn't sign until late in that season. And I'm pretty sure he signed with the Rangers or something crazy. Maybe the Twins, I can't remember. Maybe the Rangers was the next year. But he signed late into the season. Because people didn't want to give up the draft pick. That's how it's changed so much. And we'll get more to that when I start talking about the CBA. But obviously, John Mosaic, Bill DeWitt, Bobo Michael Gersh, think that they have a better idea of this franchise than what they thought that Mike Schilt had. Which, who knows? I'm not mad at a manager that won and 2 years ago, won the Manager of the Year. Had 90 win seasons. Was 41 and 28 in his first half of the season. Cardinals ended up finishing 81 and 71, which means Matheny left with a winning record, which is just even crazier to think about. Even though it was 47-46, Matheny left with a winning record in that season. And the Cardinals went on the big run and then, of course, get beat in the playoffs. And obviously they do know more than us because at the time when they got Happ and Lester, I was thinking it's fire sale time. Let's get what we can out of certain players, what we can get out of a Cabrera or a Gallegos. Because they're not going to trade anybody particular on the Major League staff or in the Major League roster in general. Maybe a Tommy Edman, other than Cabrera and maybe Gallegos. But you're not going to go out there and you're not going to trade Arenado, Yachty, or Paul Goldschmidt. You're not going to trade Tyler O'Neill. You're not going to trade your Rookie of the Year candidate, Dylan Carlson. And you're not going to trade your minor league stars in Zach Thompson, Jordan Walker, Nolan Gorman and Matthew Liberatore. So I'm not the biggest guy that wants to know what really, like, it's nice to get the download on things and to know what happened. But, I mean, what happens happens. If you could put a winning products in the field, which they've done for basically 20 years, for the last 20 years, then I'm all for it. But I also think that there's something wrong with that front office in the way they look and assess certain players. Mostly, with me, it's a Harrison Bader. I hear a lot of talk about Tommy Edman from people saying that he's not the player that he was. I never heard the Cardinals say, "Hey, Tommy Edman's not the guy." I never heard them say that. I've heard it from everywhere else, though, which is crazy to me to think. And as of right now, it's hard to make with the CBA expiring and the owners locking out the players. It's hard for sign free agents at this point. But they did get off to a good start with signing Steven Matz to a 4-year, $11 million contract. And I'm not saying that Steven Matz is what Adam Wainwright was last year. I'm not saying Steven Matz is what Jack Flaherty has been, except for last year. But I see him as a fifth starter that's going to guy that's going to go out there and get you innings and get you starts. That's the most important thing to me, is a guy that's going to go out there every day and get you every fifth day and get you starts, so you don't have to use an Oviedo, so you don't have to use Wolford in certain situations or whoever else they want to call up. I can't even think about the pitchers the Cardinals have called up in the last few years. And with Hudson, Flaherty, and Michaelis coming back, and also with the talks of maybe stretching out Jordan Hicks or an Alex Reyes, then I think it's a smart trade to just get a guy that you know is going to be consistent and go out there and get you something. Steven Matz in 2018, and I'm going to say that win losses, and you're going to say 5-11. Wow. But went out there and made 30 starts and had a 3.97 ERA. 19, 11-10, 4.21 ERA, 30 starts. 14-7 last year, 3.82 ERA, and 29 starts. I mean, that's consistency. That's what you want. You haven't had that. The only person you had that this year was with Wainwright. I mean, there was no consistency from the minor leaguers. Half your staff was injured, but when they weren't, Carlos wasn't the greatest in the world. So I like the Steven Matz trade in that he's going to get you innings. He's going to go out there and be a guy that can fill a role that you absolutely need. Now, will I be disappointed if they stop there? Yeah. Would I be surprised? No. And would I be mad and outrageous and going crazy about it? Absolutely not, because you think that you have something with the players that you have. And if you go through the lineup, your only position that you were worried about from last season, if every player plays as consistently as they did, would be at shortstop. And the Cardinals probably do need to sign another starting pitcher, and it could be, you never know. And I'll go through their free agents later, but it could be just another fifth starter. Or a guy that can do both, that can roll in both roles. Which the Cardinals still need. The Cardinals still need bullpen help also. I mean, if you go through it and look, I mean, you lose Luis Garcia, but the only two people you've got that you know what they can do at this point are Cabrera and Gallegos. I mean, you re-signed McFarland. He had a great year with the Cardinals last year, but before that, he wasn't the best pitcher. You don't get released because you're good. And it's a little different time in baseball with going with the younger players. So hey, this guy's 30 plus years old. He ain't got it no more. So let's move on to the next guy. And I don't know who that was in Washington. I don't pay enough attention to Washington. I know they got Lane Thomas. I think they had Matt Adams last year, I think. So I don't know who replaced TJ McFarland. But it's at least a left-hander to go out there, because you don't have much of that on this roster in the first place. That's why it was so nice to get Steven Matz for a change of pace. At one point last year, you had 3 left-handed starters. And when you come back with the rotation that you want to be your rotation next year, you're going to have one with Steven Matz. So at least you got the help in the bullpen where a guy like that you think can be a TJ McFarland can help you. Because if Wainwright goes out there and he gets 5 innings and gets to a plethora of left-handers, then you can think, well, I can just throw McFarland out there, or I can throw Cabrera out there. Early innings, I'd probably, because Cabrera's been a later guy and better, and been one of the better late inning guys. So I think you've got a lot of open positions on this roster, still. But I mean, I'm going to focus a lot on the shortstop position because I honestly don't get the Edmund Sosa thing. I literally seen Edmund Sosa throw a ball at a umpire's head. Literally seen it. And it's kind of funny that it happened. Like, I'm not too mad at him for it happening. It's kind of funny to see at the time. But when you get consistent defense like you had in DeYoung, I think it puts a whole different situation in there. And I said I'm be big on the certain stats here and there, and I just want to go off Sosa and DeYoung. Now Sosa did bat 271, 627 RBIs. Now the problem is they say he's out of speed, and he's also not stolen base threat, which neither is DeYoung. But my whole big thing is in the 71 games that he played this year at shortstop, Sosa had 10 errors, had 961. In 2021, DeYoung hit 197, 19 home runs, 45 RBIs. Played in 100 games, only had 8 errors, and a fielding percentage of 982. Now, it doesn't sound like the biggest jump in the world, but it's consistency. 982 is it's a pretty good fielding percentage. You don't always see that in everybody. But also, I think the offensive production is a little different. I mean, DeYoung was a 30 home run guy for you. Was a halfway decent hitter, batting between 250 and 280. Actually, still provides you something this year with the power and the RBIs. And I'm still, and so I went and looked at the stats, and I'm still not sold on Sosa. Excuse me, I said Sosa. Edmund Sosa short. I mean, a 417 game in the minors, he had 82 RBIs with a 955 fielding percentage. So I think if you take the defense away from a team where you're building to be that team that's going to get ground balls with Wainwright and Matz. And even in the long run, really, Michael is. Because you don't got a bunch of powerful pitchers out here starting. I mean, Flaherty might be your most powerful pitcher, but he's also kind of a ground ball guy. So are you sacrificing what could be one of the most important parts of your team for a little bit more batting average production? Because that's what it seems like. And a lot of people want Trevor Story, and I mean, he batted 251, 24 home runs, 74 at 5 RBIs this year. 138 games, excuse me. 144 was 2019. And that's a little extra production than what Paul DeYoung had. And batting average just, only down from Edmund Sosa, but more power. And Trevor Story kind of reminds me of Paul DeYoung's a poor guy's Trevor Story. In the defense, though, and this is why Story would be big, because it's 2019, 987, 2020, 961, which is low for him, but different season in 2020. And 2021, 138 games, 975 fielding percentage. Lower than DeYoung's, but he also played more games. He also played in a different park. I mean, I don't know how hard the ball gets hit different in Colorado, but you would seem to think that it'd be a little harder to play out there, offense, defense, whatever. So, if we don't give Story, I don't get the idea of giving up on DeYoung so quick. I want Sosa in there. Because basically at the end of the year, they just went to Sosa. and just had the young pitch hit here, and he still showed the power, still showed the defense. I mean, when you got guys, he's a middle order hitter. I don't see a middle order hitter always hitting 300 or whatever they want him to hit. 198's horrible, but with power and I mean, some people lead players with them kind of stats that Paul DeJong is in their lineup. I mean, you heard about guys that were hitting under 200 last year at certain points of time. So maybe Story isn't your best bet either, because he does have some injury issues. He's been pretty healthy the last 3 years. His lowest amounts, other than 2020, is 138. But if you don't get him, are you really losing that much with having DeJong in there? And I would have to go up and add the bat. What do you say? 20, 25 more hits gets him to a decent average, to an average that you can accept with his power and fielding ability? I mean, for a team that's always preached defense for a long time, for as long as I can remember, for a team that's done that, it's kind of weird that they're sacrificing it at some point. Even if they think that, and I just read you the stats, even if they think that Edmund Sosa can grow and stuff like that, when your fielding percentage is lower in the minors than in the majors, that's kind of scary, because that's what's to come. I mean, that's what you would think is to come. So, I think being a baseball general manager has to be the most difficult thing in the world, because you have to put so many players together. You need almost the whole 25-man roster, instead of going with the 12 in the NBA, or which hockey might be hard with. I think maybe the salary cap leagues. Say that 3 times, and you probably can't. I can't. The salary cap leagues, because they have to push him in there. But you could see how it doesn't really work in the NBA, the salary cap, because now players are just signing wherever they think they can win a championship. And I also think it happens a lot in football too. I think baseball is actually one of the least sports, and mostly because teams have a champion. Because at the time, I mean, there's only a certain amount of teams league, and the other leagues, half the teams are making, essentially. NFL is more like baseball. But in hockey, you have a chance to go anywhere you want and at least be in the playoffs, and at least give yourself a chance. Definitely if you trust in yourself and your team. Mostly if you trust in yourself. Or maybe in the head coach, it seems like in hockey, the head coach has the more to do with it than any sport in the world, which is crazy. And you see how much of it's worked for the Blues. I mean, have you ever looked at the Blues and said, man, they played really bad under Craig Berube? And it's the same thing with the Cardinals, really. And it's been the same thing with both teams over the last 2 decades. Can you really look at a manager and say, man, that guy was crappy? But I think that the Cardinals, and they're going to have a lot of time, because I don't think the CBA gets done to the end of the year. I really don't think the CBA gets done until spring training. So the Cardinals actually have a lot of time to look at that, and I just don't understand why everybody gives up so quick. And DeJong's the next one. DeJong batted 262, 11 home runs, 56 RBIs. So not much lower than Sosa, but 11 home runs, 56 RBIs, and led the league in doubles. And a guy that I think is versatile, that you can put anywhere, and he can be consistent at that position. His shortstop numbers, his second base fielding numbers are crazy. 982 in the majors in 167 games, 82 in the minors, 990. Now, if you look at the minors of him at shortstop, his shortstop is around 966, 234 games and 34 errors in the minors. In the majors, 17 games is short, 2 errors, 960. So there's another guy you could just transport over if you maybe wanted to go out, or if you wanted to bring up a Nolan Gorman. Or maybe you have somebody else in your radar, which there's not much out there that the Cardinals are willing to go get, that I think the Cardinals are willing to go get. And maybe it's a different year with the money that they have. I mean, you signed Steven Matz to a $44 million contract, and from just the players I looked up, you gained $63 million by them coming out of their contracts Flowers at 14.5. Miller at 12. 18.5 for Carpenter. KK had 8 million. Carlos Martinez 10 million. That's 63. So you've done paid for Steven Matt's whole contract over 4 years, and still have $20 million left over. So the Cardinals actually got some wiggle room here, and I know that all the teams are trying to go as low as possible. Definitely after 2020, which is understandable. That the teams are trying to go lower and lower and lower and lower. Because it's the best way to make money. But with the Cardinals, with the situations they got, with DeYoung does make a nice little chunk of change. And it's like $5 million, maybe $10 million. Maybe I got that wrong. Maybe it was 5 years, $50 million. But whatever it is, it's between $5 and $10 million. It's not much money. To which you have to go out there, you're going to go out there and spend for somebody else. And with Edman and Sosa, them are control players. And that's what every team looks forward to, is that they can have consistent, decent players that are controllable. You hear that about trades and everything. Well, they got to get some prospects because that player's controlled, or they're going to get a lot for this guy because that player's controlled. And that doesn't always turn out like the greatest thing. It's not like the Cardinals haven't got guys and that they thought were going to be good and have it. It's not like the Cardinals haven't traded off guys that other teams thought were going to be good and have it. I mean, there was the Zach Coxes, the Brent Wallaces, and it's been a while because the Cardinals trade somebody, the Randy Arozarena, Sandy Alcantara. It seems like they go out there and just tear it up for the other team. And I just don't really get the Tommy Edman. There's not, when I go out there and I watch Tommy Edman play, I don't go out there and think, man, there needs to be a way to replace him. If it's not Gorman, then I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to hear about Edman Sosa the second, even though he's actually a better second baseman than he is shortstop. 972 in the majors or in the minors, and 46 games at second base. So I understand that the shortstop position is probably just up there with third base is a hard position to play. But if you got a guy that can go out there and play without making the errors and having the range like a Paul DeYoung has, then I think you got to stay right there. And this all changes with the DH. If the DH comes to the National League, this all changes for the Cardinals. Because could you use a Gorman at DH? Because you need a left-handed bat on this roster. You need one. You got switch hitters in Edman and Carlson. If you take Edman away, your only left-handed option against mostly right-handed or against right-handers is Dylan Carlson. And the Lance Newbar thing, great. He looked good for what he was needed for. But is he some superstar player? I mean, he batted .230 something this year. I mean, at the time that he was playing was when the Cardinals were on their 17-game winning streak, and yeah, he came through in big position. But at the time, everybody was. So I think everybody's jumping the gun because they say, hey, your window is probably a little shorter than you want it to be, with Arenado getting older, with Gstlsp getting older, with Yachty saying he's retiring next year, with Wainwright not really but he's 40 years old, so it's got to be getting close. That maybe they think, well, we have to get rid of these guys because the window's small, but I don't think you sacrifice defense for a small upgrade in offense. Unless you're looking at a guy that can do a lot of things for you. And that's a guy like Nolan Gorman who can go out there and spell an Arenado at third. And also, if you're playing him a second, you got Tommy to do that. You got Paul DeYoung to do that. So there's three guys right there that can spell guys if maybe you go to Story and Gorman around. And that's not a bad bench to have DeYoung, Edman, Sosa, and Newbar out there. When you got three players that can play anywhere. And that's still excluding the DH, which who knows what the Cardinals out there. I know the Albert Pujols thing's a big thing. Right-handed batter. And if you go and get a guy and go try to spend more money, maybe you look at an in-house candidate. Newbar's definitely gonna get a look. And I don't know how far they think Gorman is, but they also got a guy that can also, which I think is a big thing, they can play first and third, and Juan Yepes, who could easily spell a guy for you. Spell an Arenado here and there, which I don't know how great he is at third. I should have looked up some stats. I looked up everybody else's stats. But can spell a Goldsmith for you if you keep a guy like Sosa on the roster who could, at the time, spell an Arenado when you need to. And I didn't even, when I went and looked up Jan Yepes, I just wanted to know how he got here. I seen that his stats, they said he was in Atlanta in the minors for a little bit, and I said, well, I didn't know that. I thought that was a Cardinals referee. Well, we actually traded him in 2017 to the Braves for Matt Adams. And Matt Adams probably had his best year that year. He was batting 291 with the Cardinals in 31 games, 1 home run, 7 RBIs. Then with the Braves that year, 100 games, 271, 19 home runs, 58 RBIs. Now, my whole thing with that is I really don't know what the Braves were doing that year. Because they also, about a week before they got Matt Adams, they had just released Ryan Howard, another left-handed first baseman, when they got a left-handed first baseman. And maybe their roster was right-handed heavy. I didn't exactly get it all that. I just wanted, when I seen that he was, I wanted like, wow, who did we trade him for? I just think 4 years later that Matt Adams might not have a major league job next year. Now, he was released early in the season from Colorado, and I don't know if he re-signed with somebody, but it hasn't been the last few good years since 2017. Really, Matt Adams hasn't been with the Matt Adams that we got or that Atlanta got, obviously, in that 100 games. But just for power, just for a candidate for DH, a guy that's got power, and you're going to hear me say this probably a lot when I talk about it. But the AAA league that the Cardinals play in is an offensive heavy league. If you look at one time, Matt Liberatore, they were talking about how great he was, had like a 5 ERA. I think he ended up with like 4.21 or something like that. But if you go look at the stats in that league, it's crazy as can be. But he had, in 111 games, he had 286, 20 home runs, 77 RBIs. The Arizona Fall League, he's had 23 games, batting 302, 7 home runs, 26 RBIs. Now, when I was looking before this, you could see that I don't know if he picked up power, playing in a different league, but he didn't have this much power when he was playing in the minors for the Braves. Or even with the Cardinals in the last few years. And I know you didn't see much in 2020. Anything at all. But if you were there to save some money, that's a good spot to do it. Which I don't know how much Pujols is really out there looking for. You just got off a $240 million contract. So I don't know if our Pujols is going out here and saying, hey, I want, he signed with the veteran minimum to the Dodgers. Just to play. And I don't know what exactly he did in the Mexican League. I should look this stuff up. I know he went down there and was like trying to show people, hey, I can still play. I still got it. A little bit of it. It might be a 41-year-old Pujols, but you've seen at times, definitely against left-handers, our Pujols still has a bat. And I also think that with the average he had, and I'm going to say the same thing for Newbar too, it's the inconsistent time of playing, only getting pitch hits, stuff like that. That's going to mess up rhythm. So maybe, Albert went out there and had and his average with the Dodgers wasn't bad at all. Just think if he would have got out of LA earlier in the season, from the Angels earlier in the season, it'd been crazy. But I also think there's a lot to go out there and get if you don't go after these small players. And the first one that jumped out at me, and he's on the first base list, but Brad Miller, who was here and showed a little bit of pop, showed a little bit of promise, played everywhere. So there's a guy who could spell everybody, but has a little pop in his bat. Now, not the greatest average, and this is where I'm at with that. It's like I said, people are keeping these players around. Batted 230, but almost a 21 home run guy. And a decent amount of RBIs that could make a difference. The guy could come in against left-handers or against right-handers when you need him to. And also play second, short, third, all the outfield positions. Also first base. The only thing he can't play is catcher. And of course, I got then I told you there wasn't much out there. There's not much left out there, which is crazy to think about how much they talked about this free agent class. And there's still a lot to be known, but stories out there. Travis Shaw, another left-handed bat who we've seen in Milwaukee, who has some pop, but another guy with a low average, but can play multiple positions, third, second, and first. And I'm sure you could throw him in the outfield if you really needed to. But I'm more, if we're not going to go after the big names, I think it's better to build depth. I think Brad Miller and Travis Shaw are them kind of guys. If you're not going to go for a Trevor Story, if you want to go a little farther into it and think of a guy that can get consistent at bats and might be very helpful to this team, and we're going to go with a few outfielders because my problem is with the outfield is what consistency do you know that they have? What do you know about this outfield? I mean, Bader showed flashes here and there in offense, but it's not like in defense he's great, but it's not like he's been that consistent. Dylan Carlson, is he going to fall in a sophomore slump? You look at his stats, his are about the same as, with a little more pop, is about the same as Tommy Edmonds. So go figure that one. And this was Tyler O'Neill's first year. So there's 3 spots. I mean, your whole outfield right there is almost a guessing game. So I'm more on the outfield players than I am on the infield. A guy like Kyle Schwarber, left-handed bat. He gets you pop. Great arm in the outfield. Another guy that can go out there and play some defense. It could, hey, maybe you want to give Carlson a rest. And now you have the chance. Carlson's a pretty good defender, but I know he can play. But maybe, hey, Bader's struggling. You can move pieces of people around. You need to have Carlson play center field and put wherever you feel like putting. Schwarber, who also learned some third base this year, learned some first base this year, so it could work out. You got a guy like Eddie Rosario, another left-handed bat that's got pop. John Peterson, got World Series winner, played wonderfully for the Atlanta Braves. Not the best averages in the world, but the guy, I mean, these are all guys that are going to get you something. Get you power in a spot and also have ways to spell you. Jose Soler, former 40 home run hitter with Chris Davis, who the power he's got. The problem is he likes to strike out, and for 3 years in a row, you knew exactly what you're going to get, but you don't know if he's still got that anymore, and it was only 240. I think 3 years in a row, he had 241, but still, it's something kind of pop and a guy that can spell your outfield. And if you keep the guys like Edman, Sosa, and if you Gorman, you'll have your defensive backups, and then you'll also have Newbar around there hanging. Now, I was talking about the pitching earlier, and the starting pitcher market has kind of gone down, and I'm trying to base my free agency off reality. So I could see multiple guys on that list that I would want, but I'm more or less trying to base it off of how the Cardinals roll. So a guy like Mike Flyers, who's been pretty good in Oakland. And there's been talk about it too. Lester. And not that he's been the best pitcher, and he's a 5-inning pitcher. But, I mean, a 5-inning pitcher could be a pretty good 6th starter. And maybe they don't want to put 200 innings on Jack Flaherty. Maybe they don't want to put a certain amount of innings on a Dakota Hudson or a Miles Michaelis to try to keep them fresh when you need them. So, hey, I mean, a 6-man rotation could work for this team, but you also give Wainwright a break. You also give Steven Matz a break. So at the beginning of the season, I could see a Lester on this roster. I don't know what it would be after that. Because once you get down to a stretch and you see what your 5 best pitchers are, you're not going to go for a 6-man rotation. You're going to consistently stay with 5. Because the Cardinals just don't seem like a team that are going to go with that guy that they call a starter or whatever they want to call him. Or, yeah, I don't the relievers that start the games. So I don't think that's a dumb move to maybe bring back a guy like Lester. You got a guy like out there Julio Teheran, who can do both, who can pitch in the bullpen and pitch the starting position as a pitcher, and not that old of a guy, and has had some consistency in his career, definitely in Atlanta. Now, the 2 that I did put on the list that were, I would call out of the Cardinals league, were Carlos Rodon and Zach Greinke. Because I think that Zach Greinke is a guy who can go out there and get a contract, and I think with Rodon being a left-handed starter, that and being a consistent one, throwing a no-hitter last year, that he could be a guy that's going to get a big contract. So I don't think the Cardinals are going after them types of players that they know are going to go out here and get money. So I would look at the short. I would really like a guy like Julio Teheran here. Fires wouldn't bother me. It really, in the long run, Lester wouldn't bother me all that much. Now, where I really think, and I said this earlier, because you only got 2 consistencies in the bullpen. So I think they should. I think Julio Teheran would be perfect for that because he could get you some innings if somebody falters. And also, if you need to throw that 6 starter out there, you got that too. But like a guy like Joe Kelly, former Cardinal, who I'd love to see here, who's got a fastball, another guy can throw 100 out of bullpen, and has been a pretty good pitcher when he was here, and since he's left, has been a reliever the whole time. You got a guy out there like Tommy Hunter, which a lot of people might not know, but former Texas starter, but has done some pretty good things as a closer. In Baltimore for a while, I think he might have came back to Texas. But the guy I've always liked, Daniel Norris, who's been a closer, Sean Doolittle, who's was a good closer in Washington, Ian Kennedy, who was a great closer in Texas and in Kansas City, former starter, maybe a guy that can go out there and get you a couple more innings. Wade Davis, former Cub, left-handed guy, so you probably look less at him because of who you got. But I think a consistent guy that could go out there and just eat up innings in the bullpen when you need it. Hunter Strickland's in there, even though that's a scary guy. You've seen him allow 9 billion home runs over his career. Now, there's one guy that I would really love to have, and I don't know if the Cardinals have this kind of money, is in Ricardo Rodriguez. And I think that I also wrote down in that with that was Ryan Terapa and Andrew Chaplin. Because I think the guys that can be consistent relievers, definitely with the starters, openers, that's what they're called. The openers in the league, so basically relief pitchers going out there and pitching 1, maybe 2 innings. That at certain times you're going to need a guy to go out there and get consistency. And I think that like guys like Chaplin are going to be heavy on the market whenever the CBA goes up. I also had my fun picks, like former Cardinals, and a guy from St. Louis I threw in there, John Axford, Trevor Rosenthal, Adam Ottavino, Shelby Miller, and just for fun, Pete Cosmo's on the free agent list. What? Pete, the Wizard of Cos. And also I had Shelby on that list. Shelby Miller is a free agent, who the Cardinals actually looked at last year. I don't know what they looked at him for, because I don't know if Shelby Miller is a consistent starting pitcher anymore. But this is all going to go with the CBA and what the Cardinals get. The whole CBA thing it's always been kind of a different thing to me. Because, like as a cook, like it feels like me, like what the players want, and what's just more money and revenue. It's like me going to my boss, and maybe it's in their contract for revenue sharing. See, I don't know the contract. I don't know how things work. Like, hey, a guy gets signed to a $210 million contract. I don't know what's all in that. I just know he's getting paid. He's getting paid. But it'd be like me going to a cook and saying, hey, you went out there and you did all this. You did the marketing. You put your name on the business. You did this. You made sure that we're getting this consistently. You're making sure we're paid on time. But hey, since you're making some extra money by doing your extra duty, and I'm the guy that back here, and I make all the food. I'm the one that reason in the long run they keep coming back, because if the food isn't good and consistent, then you can put whatever you could put 900 billion commercials on TV. But say, hey, since you did all this, and now we're making money, I was part of that, let me go and cut into your chunk of change, even though I have a set salary. And it's a little different because I don't have a contract, and would I have thought to write that into my contract? Hell effing no. Straight up. And it's funny going back and listening to these podcasts, and I've listened to podcasts from 2 years ago, and I'm not listening to podcasts from 2 years ago to listen to the CBA, but I'd look them up and I say, hey, they're talking CBA in here, and I know there's not a lot of people going out there and listening to podcasts from 2 years ago. A loser like me is, but I mean the former players and stuff, and I think it's once they break away from the major leagues where they're not under that scrutiny or under the watch, they're saying, hey, we kind of did this ourselves as players.
We signed off on all this. We were at the bargaining table. And we gave them the leeway to think that this is how it's going to work. And I think 2020, which is the one time we'll talk 2020, is kind of changed it for the players. They're like, wow, they're still making a decent amount of money. And I also think that the players were mad about the salary cuts, even though it was only a third of the season. I mean, if I had a $50,000 contract and they're like, hey, we're going to be out for a week because, I would go on vacation. Well, you're going to pay me my contract. Whatever my contract says I'm making that week, that's on you. So I think the players actually hurt themselves in this. And I think that's why there was such a big free agency thing before it shut down, because either the players know that there's a chance that they're going to get less money and teams are going to have less to spend, or it's going to come out and be a free-for-all and it's just going to be teams fighting for everybody, and you might as well get in while you can, because if you notice, when teams get done signing players, another player doesn't get signed to like June or July unless it's need be. I mean, look at Lance Lynn. Whenever Cardinals released him, we got Michaels. He wasn't signed until like June just for a little draft pick, which is the stupidest thing in the world. So you lose your best player because you don't want to pay him the money he wants. Other team will. Which, if you look like if Lance Lynn's contracts, you would flip out at what the Cardinals wouldn't pay him, and then went out there and paid Michaelis. But with the CBA, I understand the contract. I understand how everything works with that. But when you're out here, you're going to, in the long run, it could only cost the players by going out here and making these statements, saying, hey, we need this, and the owners don't do this, because you're getting paid an ungodly amount of money. And I think the players' leeway in this situation is to go out there and say, hey, we want the DH so we get paid. Which is definitely, hey, get more players paid. Get more of your peers paid, which is definitely understandable. I'm all for it. But you've done put yourself in a position where, hey, we're going to get paid, but we done cost ourselves by letting these little things slide in here. And I was talking about it before with arbitration and holding players that are players that are controllable. 6 years is a long time. So let's say you get out of college at 20. So you're controlled with a team making a certain amount of money until you're 28 years old. I have no say in the matter unless they don't put you in a 40-man and then you can, ask for your release or whatever, however that works. Or, luck, maybe you get drafted in a Rule 5 and get some kind of luck. But to make more money, the players cost themselves to say, hey, when we got on free agency, we're going to hit it. But we'll accept this little deal because we're good enough to do that. Well, in the long run, yeah, you're good enough to go out there and get this $20 million. But now teams, with all the analytics and put more, are getting players that, hey, he's going to cost me $500,000 for 6 years. This guy's going to cost me closer to $20 million. I think I'm going to go with that guy that makes $500,000. And then none of the players complain and bitch. You signed it. And 6 years is a little long. And I think the players said they want 3. And I don't think that, and I don't know how rookie contracts work in other leagues, but I'm pretty sure 3. But I don't think that the owners will go down that far. Definitely figure they're going to want to be playing the players what they're paying them, plus add another player in DHs, which the American League has already dealt with that. But if you're going to a National League, I think that's less money for a Trevor Story to go on a National League team, because we can go get somebody that has his type of power, and we don't have to worry about defense. And we got, this guy in the minors that can definitely play some shortstop. Then hey, we can sign this DH to 10 to 12 million, and not sign and double that by signing a guy that we can think that can help our team this much, and we can get that same productivity for this much. Like, it's a big effing circle that the players and the owners got themselves in. Now, the luxury tax thing and the salary cap thing, but the salary cap's like 210, or the salary cap, the luxury tax is like 220 million. And after that, you're not even you can go over it all you want, and you're just paying a tax for it. That's why it's a luxury tax. You're going over a limit, and they're telling you to pay a tax on it. That doesn't happen in other sports. So these players still get paid no matter what they want, no matter what they want. But what you did is you sold yourself so low so you could be so high, and now you're just fucking yourself. And I said a cuss word. That was the first one of the show, huh? But you're effing yourself by doing this. Now, should the players that draft a player get some kind of control? Absolutely. 6 years seems a little rough. And I was thinking about it earlier. 3 year, I mean 4 or 5. Because at least you're 27. If you just come out of college 5 years later, you're 27, and you know what you got. I mean, there's not a bunch of players that come up that used to come up like that. But now you got the 23-year-olds, the 22-year-olds, the guys that got drafted last year coming up the next year because it's cost effective for the owners. Definitely after what they can say they lost in 2020. So, for me, I think there has to be some kind of medium. And I think the players have lost sight of that. They're like, no, we want this, we want this, we want this. Well, the owners just said, we'll lock you out. If you're locked out, we ain't got to pay you. So it almost runs backwards for how they did themselves. And I think that after this free agency little bump of last year, of 2021, right before it, I think that it's going to hurt free agency because you don't know if they're going to put a freeze on it for a little bit. They're letting minor league contracts though, so they probably won't. But I think you could see some guys that some teams like, hey, we got this player. So why waste a draft pick on him? Why go out there and say, why go out there and say, hey, we got the same guy, but he's making $500,000, and this guy's gonna have to make 15, and we're gonna pick. I think it's gonna hurt him in the long run with the players. Understandably, the owners locked him out, so the excuse is gonna be the owners did this. But if you lock yourself, if you get locked out, you're not gonna get paid. And I think it's going to hurt because I think teams got who they want, and there's a couple of free agents out there that teams are going to go get. But I think if the luxury tax goes down, I think owners are going to be more hesitant. I also think that if the players don't get what they want, they're going to try to go out. They're going to wait and wait and wait. And I think you could see some players that don't sign until June. I think you could see in the next couple years a lot more call-ups than you would if this was just a regular year. I mean, teams are getting younger and younger no matter what, and the control isn't a much of a thing because the players that know they're under control and they're like, oh, well, we're still under control for 4 more years. Well, hey, they're going to sign us to this contract that only has us under control for 3 for a couple million for the next few years. Well, I'm going to take that because it's double, quadruple what I make. And I'm only under control 3 years instead of 4. Which I think is one of the smartest things that the owners did. But I think you could really see it, an upspring in young players being in this league. And I also think it hurts the players that would usually stick around this league and maybe get backup jobs. Because they're going to be like, well, I'm not going to pay this guy this. I'm just going to bring this guy up from the minors. And now you're sitting at home and you're going to have to go to independent leagues or whatever it is that they have to do. Which, like I said, I think when you're doing this while you're fighting something, the way this contract should be it should be a long-running contract to where they have negotiations in the middle of it. So it never stops, so you never have to worry because you're going to have your fans that will be like, oh, they locked out, they made me miss out a whole bunch of free, and it's people are like that into the sport. That's just how it is. and it's a losing fan base already. With the major leagues are already losing fans in general. So this could hurt the owners also. Like I said, everything's full circle in this. It makes zero sense. And that's why I think it should be a long running contract where hey, we made this much, you want to make this much. Let's figure it out. Instead, they're throwing stuff on Twitter and saying this guy does this, and this guy does this, and this guy does that. Which in the long run makes zero sense to me how that works. You just go out there and say, hey, Manfred, Tony Clark, and like, look, we've seen your revenues and the difference between 2021 and 2022. So let's extend this maybe a year. Because let's see where the revenues are then, and then let's make the difference then. It's like you can project anything. So I'm kind of confused on how that's going to shake out, how it's going to work for each team in the long run. And this Rams lawsuit, it's something that was very intriguing to me for the last few years. I think it was 2018 is when they actually filed. And boy, did I get excited. Sorry to lie. There, when you start hearing things like, well, we could get a couple $1 billion for the city and a franchise. And I think that's more of the lawyers putting stuff out there for people on podcasts to say, people like me to go out there and say, well, I got from the owners that this guy's going out here and he's talking about, man, St. Louis is going to get an expansion team out of this, and blah, blah, blah. Which I don't ever think it was at that point. I think when it got to a point to where Kroenke said, I'm going to end this indemnification agreement, and I'm just going to go out and pay him myself, where the NFL was like, yo, we don't want all this stuff out in trial. Even though we might have a chance to win, which that lawsuit's a toss-up. Because if you go back far enough, you know that the Rams had asked multiple times, like, hey, we gotta keep this here, we're gonna extend the lease for another year, we're gonna extend this for another year. And then finally the Rams got to a point where they could go to year-to-year leases without having to negotiate anything, and the Rams came up with a $220 million thing for the dome, and the Rams. The city of St. Louis came up with $220 million to fix the stadium, and the Rams came with a $790 number that the arbitration ended up saying, hey, the Rams are right. This is what you're supposed to do. This is what it's going to cost. And I think at that time, the city of St. Louis said, hey, this is a lost cause at this point, because in the long run, we're going to have to build a new stadium. It ain't going to work. And I think that some people in that city office actually were halfway decent, smart people, or in the city of St. Louis that said, hey, man, they're leaving now. Like, we done messed up so much. Like, we done put stuff in contracts where they're leaving. Let's go out here. Let's fake it out. Let's act like we're going to do something. And then when they leave, let's go try to get some money. Which is funny just to think about. But when you start hearing talk of Kroenke's going to settle for $200 million, and then if they break it down, then they're like, oh, well, if they got $200 million out of Kroenke, they might just go after other year to get $200 million. Oh, and just stop that, they just might, get this certain amount. Well, they didn't get close to any of the amounts. They didn't get an expansion team. We haven't seen much of the details of the contract. We heard the city said they settled. All that good stuff. But it wasn't what we wanted. Now, $790 million minus lawyer fees, $500 million. There's a lot you could do with it. The first thing I think you should do, and I know this, I'm going to say the first thing I think you should do, and then what you should probably do, and then I don't have no idea what they're going to do. But I think if you thought that you can upgrade that dome for $290 million, I think $220 million, $290 million, whatever the number was. $200 plus million. $270, something like that. Something crazy. I think you should look into putting in that dome. Definitely with your chances of XFL coming back and having the Betalogs in there. But also, that dome's a multi-purpose stadium, not just for sporting events and concerts and all that, but And they have a whole other wing. It's the America Center. But I think definitely in a place where you have a lot of people you could put in there for it to be more attractive. And not just to major sports franchises, but for concert goers, for stuff like dirt racing and monster trucks, but also for that you could probably somehow fit a baseball field, but for Little League term, you could make a lot of money on the stadium if you made the place look halfway decent, which I think outside it looks great. I think actually it looks halfway decent outside. On the inside, it's the worst place in the world. I mean, absolutely one of the worst places in the world. Only football team I know that caught their football field on fire during warm-ups. I was actually at that game, the one game I went to, in like the last few years of the games. I was at the game where it caught on fire. Who knew? But if you're not going to do that, and this is more likely what they're probably going to do, is hopefully, this is what they're probably going to do, is start to just buy it. I would tear down what you own, make it look better, and then force these other property owners that own these properties that told you that they were going to spend millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars here, and say, hey, we're going to buy this house for $20,000. We're tearing this thing down. Take it or leave it, because we're tearing it down. Because really they just keep getting these, like, there's so many people that came to the city and bought up all these properties and said, hey, and gave them a contract and said, hey, we're going to do this for, we're going to fix this for $30 million. And they've done $0. $0 doesn't work. And they're big corporations, and that's why it's easily the taxes are paid and all that. So you have what my whole thing is. So you just need to go buy these properties and knock them down, because you have to make a city that was once vibrant and brain. Make people want to go down there. Nobody wants to go down to that city. Nobody. I'm not scared of nothing in the world. I don't want to go down to the city. You got people getting their cars robbed at the most important things that are happening at your town, which is sporting events, baseball, hockey and basketball, SLU basketball. People are getting shot walking out of the stadiums. They're getting shot walking out the bars. They're getting robbed. You can't go down there without worrying about your car. 3 hours of worrying about your car. Uber's prices went so high, it's not even worth it to go down there on an Uber to try to maybe save some of your possessions that you've worked for and hopefully not get shot. But you took a city that was once, you didn't hear about this stuff 10, 15 years ago, it seemed like to me. And now it's the most outrageous thing. We make every list: sexually transmitted diseases, murders, stabbings, whatever it is. St. Louis top of the list. That's ridiculous. I don't know if it's police. How they're not policing in like Busch Stadium and Ballpark Village is unimaginable to me. The biggest attraction to your city, and you can't protect it. And it's to fund the cops, and you can come up with all these excuses. Like, if you really can say that, give me how many cops are on duty at a time. Show me a square area of how much they got to cover and how many cops can do that. I've been constantly having cops drive up and down Market Street and Busch Stadium and all the apartments and everything right there at Ballpark Village. How is that not protected? And then driving down 70 or even at some points 55 is, you look like you're in a you look like that the war just happened. You're like, wow, this city looks nice. And then there's a big baseball stadium, or the dome, or the hockey stadium, Anheuser-Busch. You have so many assets here, and none of them are useful to you right now. Zero of them. It makes zero sense that you have took a one city, and then the politics have shamed it. And the problem is that the city and county can't get along. And I don't know if St. Charles is involved in that lawsuit, but they should let that money go. St. Charles, you're not getting none of it. Like, St. Charles themselves to say, hey, you guys did more for it than we did. Like, hey, we want this whole area, the greater St. Louis area, to be better. And I'm sure, and you see what St. Charles does. They just say, hey, we'll start closing bars at 11 o'clock. We'll have police all over the place. You're going to tell me that St. Charles can somehow provide more cops than the city of St. Louis? And that's why, in the long run, the county and the city just need to come together and get over themselves. Nobody's going to want to be in the county if you can't. There's nothing in the county that is even close to as good as the city of St. Louis. The bar is nothing. Never has been, never will be. It's an atmosphere. There's a difference in atmosphere. And that's the problem, is took all the excitement atmosphere out of the city of St. Louis, and now it's just people, it's depressing. People don't want to go down there. You took it away because you want to fight over this $2 million that's going to this project that never gets done. It's funny, you can come up with the stadium money for the soccer, and I know that the Taylors and Kavanaugh did a lot of that. But that's bringing a soccer team down here for how many games. I think it's like something like 40 games or 20 games. That's not going to change your city. And with that coming, I think a team like the Battlehawks, you're going to want to, if you're the XFL, you're going to want to show off something new. So you're going to want to show off, hey, this is the new XFL with the new Battlehawks in their new stadium. So that's why my whole thing is to put money in the dome, because it's there already. And it ain't going nowhere. You're not going to tear it down. You're not going to tear down what has attracted, the wrestling tournaments and everything like that, but make it attractive. Make it where people want to go down and play at the Dome. Where guys say, hey, our teams, leagues, whatever, can say, hey, let's just go see if we can make something out of the Dome. Because you're going to lose that. You're going to lose all the opportunity at that stadium when that soccer field comes. So you have to do something. And I just don't know if the city of St. Louis is at that point where they thought about this all the way through. I think this is a bad time for St. Louis to get this $450 million. I think it's a horrible time. $500 million. I think it's a horrible time. The politicians are horrible. They can't get along with their, the county who with Ladue and Huntley and all that, you don't think that if you added the county and city together, I know these presidents are going to say, oh, we don't want to pay for that shit. But a flow of money that would go into a city that is always complaining about money. But yet we can't figure that out. We can't figure out how to go talk, say, hey, we need help. We're too good to say that. Why? It just never made sense. We can do this on our own. No, you can't, obviously. Because everything you've tried, Wash Ave, all that has shut down except for Ballpark Village. Ballpark Village ain't going to shut down because the Cardinals are it. The Cardinals make money. People want to be involved with the Cardinals in this city. So going down to Ballpark Village and living there is almost like being a part of the Cardinals. It's just not, does somebody really want to go down there and win a winner? And, parking structures would be great. Free parking structures would be great. Another reason to bring people down, like, hey, down here we got free parking. We can go in this general area. Definitely in the winter time with, like, the Blues or something. Because who wants to walk a couple miles to go to a Blues game in the middle of winter? Because in that 2 miles, you're going to die. That's just how it is. And that's how people think. So hopefully this $500 million gets spent some halfway decent, good way. If they need me to come down and tell them what to do, I'm all for it. Throw me $1 million or that, and I'll control that whole 500. And I'm pretty sure I'll do a better job than they would. I get a little team together. And I just go get an army truck and start just running over houses instantly. You've let so many people run your show to get the money on the back end, just like the players and with the CBA. The city of St. Louis sounds like the Major League Baseball players. You messed yourself so much to get the money on the back end that now if you got that money back end, there's no more money to go around for you. There's nothing for you, and people don't trust you. Because you done got the city of St. Louis done got you a million times by saying we're going to fix this and this, this, and this, and this. And never held anybody to it. Never even held themselves to like having any sort of fault in it. And it's kind of tiring to hear that from a city all the time. Oh, it's not, this guy, no, you gave these incentives. And they screwed you, and you're just letting it happen by saying, oh no, they screwed us, and we're going to fix it, and not do nothing about it. It's been going on for years. You go read about all these properties that other people have bought in the city of St. Louis. All these blocks of houses that people have bought that are just sitting there. And I know that's going to hurt the homeless problem. That's my big thing, is it's going to hurt the homeless problem. Because a lot of homeless people are sleeping down there in them houses. So now you're going to have more on the street. Well, there's some more money right there. Fix it. Don't shut down these homeless shelters. Now I said Larry King. Whatever the guy's name is that owns the homeless shelter down. Larry Rice. There we go. They can never, maybe that's not the guy. Maybe that's just not the guy. I never thought he was the guy. New Life Evangelism Center. In the city of St. Louis shut that down so many times. They don't control their area, when I know people that have been in homeless shelters, which usually they kick you out during the day to go find a job, and then you're only there for a certain amount of time. I don't know how many days that is. I don't know if they if you come in at midnight, if they make you get out. I don't know how all that works. But you have to figure out something for the city. Definitely when you got a little stash of money to sit in there. $500 million might not sound a lot. It might sound like a lot to you and me, but it's not a lot that you can make happen with it in a city that needs so much. And we'll kind of siphon off of that and go into the only thing the city has going for right now in the Blues. And like I said earlier, when I said there's been a decade in both sports that we still have in the city of St. Louis of coaching from, you go to Larissa to Matheny to Schilt, and you can go from Hitchcock to, Mike Yeo was all right, to Craig Berube. But this Craig Berube guy, and Doug Armstrong deserves all the credit in the world. Just to think how many, Perron out with the concussion, Thomas has been on the injured list, Shin has been on the injured list, I almost said Sheen. Huso's on the injured list. You had Bennington out there. You went and got your fifth string goalies because you're pushing the salary cap so much. And then they go out there and win 5 out of 6 games. Carly Lindgren winning all 5. And you could, like I said earlier, a manager holds a team together. And a guy that can, hockey, you're switching into the lines, you're switching up people, you're making different pairings to try to make the team better. So a lot of this should go to Craig Berube. For a team that's in third place in their division, in a playoff spot, would still be in a playoff spot even, if they thought that they're tied for second in points. Their problem right now is winning percentage. If you look at it, how could you think that a team has lost half their team and is pushing the salary cap could make it to be in the position they're in? And when the Blues made a trade, I had to look it up to see what they traded, but when they made the Sammy Bash trade, I was kind of mad. I was the happiest camper about that. And now the guy that they traded for, Pavel Budashev, leads you to even points, and one of the most consistent players on your team. And I think having a guy like there with, kind of grew up the same way Tarasenko did, within the same age as Tarasenko. When I looked it up, I couldn't believe that he was only 26 years old. I think that's kind of helped made Tarasenko kind of stay. And he's tied with Budashev in points. Just think if you would have traded Tarasenko for nothing, just to get, which we need that salary cap. And in the NHL, every team is pushing because you have to pay your players and you don't want them to leave, so you're pushing the salary cap in every team. And the Blues have been the best at that. This team doesn't make money. They push a salary cap every year. And even when they don't push the salary caps, they're always making upgrades to try to help the team out or free up salary cap to bring up this guy here, this guy we think is good in the minors. I mean, that nice little chunk of change that Tarasenko makes would have been nice for the Blues to have some leeway. But just think if you lost them, how bad this team would be. And this ain't the only trade. Like, you could think Shen for Lori Laterra. Yori Laterra. There you go. I mean, Ryan O'Reilly for Tage Thompson and Patrick Berglund. And there's been other ones in there that, I can't think of the top of my head. But, Dakota Joshua got traded for some cash considerations. Wasn't the biggest guy on the Zach Sanford trade other than Logan Brown was from St. Louis, played consistent. And then the consistency that you've had in, who knew? I would never even thought that a few years ago. But I would say the same thing I remember them talking about Jordan Bennett a few years ago. Like, yeah, he's going to always be, a third string goalie. And now he's the top of it, which with Husso, you could always see there was a goalie controversy. And now with Lindgren being how good he has been, 188 save percentage, 5-0. There's also they're trying to start another goalie controversy, and really, Bennington hasn't been all that bad. 288 goals against, excuse me. And he has a winning record if you go off to the NHL. It's really an even record. I think it's 9-9, or 8-8 or something like that. But if you're getting points in them overtime games, so he's consistently getting you points. And I hope they don't play the Cardinals, and maybe you go with the hot hand. But Jake Allen didn't make as much. Made about the same money, but made less than Beansy did. So I think you have to look at that and be like, oh, maybe we should go with the money guy first. Definitely, so you know what you have. So maybe if somebody sees a little bit from Bennington, you can get that off your books. Or, you trade him and only have to pay half. I think you have to look at him to a certain point. But then going back to Doug Armstrong about all this, but the players that he's got in this team and drafts and just random trades and, it's not just the first round guys or second round guys. There's McCullough, a 5th round pick playing on this team. But their ages, like Thomas, 22, Husso, 26. Benjamin Bennington, 28. Barbashev, 29. Kim Clausen, 22. Cairo, 23. I said Bucha before, 26. Nico McCullough, 23. Jake Woman, 3rd round pick, 23. 23 for Logan Brown. Zach Sanford, I just talked about that. Dakota Joshua, I just talked about, 25. 2nd round pick in Scott Pernovich, 23. And then Nathan Walker, 23. You've not only have kept this team young at the same time while doing all this, but now you're giving all your young guys experience to where a guy like a James Neal, who hasn't played like horrible this season, is on the injury list with an undisclosed injury, might not be on the team for the rest of the year. And it's played decent because it's the way that the circle of life has just come on and done what it has for the Blues. You haven't seen something like this in a long time. Definitely with the injuries and stuff with the Blues. Usually a team like this is just going to falter. When you're going out there and running, at one point, and the NHL was smart for shutting down for Christmas, and they also now said they're going to shut down for the Olympics because of the COVID test. Smart time to do it, but for the Blues, they could have done it a couple weeks ago because the Blues are running a skater short, and we're down to 4th and 5th string goalies, and this and that, and so it's nice to get a little break to try to get some of these guys healthy and off the injured list and do COVID protocols and all that. And then give them another break in February to make sure that, because they're going to take it anyway, to make sure that all the teams are healthy to make a consistent season. It's crazy to think about where the Blues are right now. Because they've had, a couple bad streaks, of losses. And I don't know I didn't look up who started the last game. I'm going to say it was almost for sure it was Lindgren. So he might be 5-1 now, but hey, first Blue ever to win first 5 straight starts, whatever, however it works. He's only 28. So it's almost like the Major League Baseball thing where you have to look at young players and say, hey, this is going to be better than this guy. So maybe we can keep a guy like a Ryan O'Reilly or a Tarasenko or a Budoshev who got a new contract. And we can go out here and lose a Clauston. And we can make this team more efficient than it was before. So, I mean, it's understandable. Not understandable how the Blues are doing it. I don't understand it. So that's going to do it for the podcast. For my Grandma Hicks, love you, Grandma. For Lori Paul and Grandma Bowlesby, R.I.P. And for Maddie, Jake, Zach, Rhiannon, and Joe, this has been the Sports Blog on the Greater STL Sports Network, part of Street G Records, LLC.